All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to walk through my data and hopefully everything makes sense. This is being recorded because I can't figure out how to make it live. So here we go. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is show you the original data that I collected. Okay, so this is from my American music class. And the project was for me to introduce note values to students. So there's 4 beats in a measure, and they had to learn what all the different note rhythms were and how they could fit together to make a whole measure, like kind of like fractions. So the goal for my school was for us to show improvement in tiers. And you can see that by looking at the top here. So depending on how they performed in the pre-test, I had to get them to a certain level of understanding by the post-test. So if they have no idea what they're doing, 0 to 30%, we want them to achieve a 50% increase, or 20%, whichever is greater, which of course 50% is greater. 31 to 60%, we wanted them to achieve a 70% increase, or 20 to 70%, excuse me, or add 20%. So like if they got a 32, they would have to achieve at least a 70. But if they were at a 59, then we would have to add 20% to that, making the goal 79. So the gap in how much they had to cover was less and less, the better off they did in the pretest, which is kind of confusing. If that's confusing, I can come back to that. But we just tiered the learning so that we could target students at different levels. Okay, so overall, the pre-test scores were kind of all over the place, which isn't really surprising. The ones in green were ones that were already passing at the pre-test level. The ones in orange were ones that were passing, but maybe we had some concerns about them. There was room to improve. The red, obviously, were students that we had a strong target towards. And then we had like a really awesome guy, this named James. He already knew what he was doing from the beginning, so he was at 100% the whole time. So then when we look at the midpoint values, in general, we see a huge increase. All of these students here are now well within a passing grade range at this point. And then in the post-test, many of them stay around the same area, but we do see some students that have drops. Like here we have some drops. Down here we have a significant drop from a 95 to a 70. We've got some people that slid back just a little bit here. This one dropped from 100 to a 70. So there are less students that performed at 100% at this point for the post-test. So some of the things that I noticed right away while looking at this is that a lot of these students are male, and of course I know that because I teach the class. And then I noticed, of course, the discrepancy between the midpoint and the post-assessment. And then over here in this last column, it tells us whether or not my goal was met. So did they make the improvement that I set out to make with those students? And that was true 72% of the time. So anything that says false here, they did not reach the goal that was labeled up here from the pre-test to the post-test. Now, they may have met it at the midpoint, but the midpoint was significantly easier than the post-test, which is something that I'm going to go through in my exploratory questions as well. So the next thing that I'm going to pull up is the graph that goes along with that as well. So I'm going to pull that up in one moment. Okay. So here is the graph of the student data. And I'm going to try and get closer if I can. This is on the Google Doc as well. So Hopefully you can see it better there. But it basically shows the same information that we saw on the other side, but it's easier to see in visual how these students performed going from their pre-test to their post-test. So you can see incremental growth for some students. You can see some students did really poorly, and then as soon as we got to the midpoint, it's like a light bulb went off. And then over here, we see sometimes that once they got to the midpoint, that was it. Like they got it and they kept with it. But there are a couple of instances like this one right here where you can see the backslide onto the post-test. So some of the things that I've noticed, I'm going to share those with you. It's a group of 8th grade students. Most were male. I only have about 4 females in that class. A large portion of class performed well on the midpoint. One student received a 0 for the post-test, and I can explain that, but that he refused to take it, so he just kind of sat there multiple times, so that's why he received a 0. The pre-test shows that students came in at varying ability levels from 19% all the way up to 100%. All students, with the exception of the student with the 0 on the post-test, showed improvement from pre-test to post-test. I just didn't necessarily see the increase that I wanted to see. And I noticed that the expectations for the student achievement are tiered. And this has been, you know, I can be happy that all of the students improved, but they didn't improve to the level I needed in the tiered statement. So that's kind of something to have some concerns about. So some of the things that I might wonder about when I'm looking at this, and I'm going to go back to that graph, is why there was a backslide for so many students from the midpoint to the post-test. Why there's a large amount of boys that are being tested. I wonder if there was enough time in the instruction to get them from the midpoint to the final, if that may have something to do with it. I also wonder if there were IEPs or some learning issues in there that are not displayed on the graph. All right, so I hope this is good for you guys. Please let me know if there's anything else you'd like to add, because this is something that I'm actually rated on to for my job. So I went down from highly effective to effective teacher this year because only 72% of my students met this goal. So it is really interesting to me, and I'd like to fix it up for next year. All right, thanks.